Okay, peace everybody. My name is Lee Jordan Jr. I am an assistant serving director at Black Youth Institute, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about the art of regeneration when it meets urban agriculture. Huh? And so one of the main things I want to talk about is how we attack climate change, right? The four major factors that we're attacking is sea level rise, wildfires, asthma triggers, and radon. And I wanted to introduce the understanding or an understanding of what regenerative farming offers us in reference to being able to defend ourselves against climate change, right? And so, how would you see regenerative farming? Think mitigation waste, right? Think being able to having no waste, right? Think nothing gets wasted, everything is used, everything is going to somewhere where it is reused for what it's worth, right? Think restoration, right? These pieces of land in our case, we have urban farm, which is right inside of the community, which we're taking plots of land that otherwise would be dormant in spaces for other things that are not so, welcome in the community. However, today we've turned it into an urban farm. And so arguing that restoration is a big piece of it. But more than anything, right, talking about this piece of sustainability. So sustainability practices does something that I really appreciate, which is, yes, it helps us put a halt to climate change, but it also helps us fight back, right? It's great to be able to come up with these different models that help us mitigate the problem. But when we're talking about solutions that actually give us something back or give us a chance to kind of what I would call reverse the narrative, then that is what we're talking about with regenerative farming, right? And if we're talking about a few practices that come to mind when you think of regenerative farming or sustainable practices, think about livestock, right? Think about what they offer the land when they're grazing, with their outputs and just everything that contribute to the economy. Think about soil improvement, right? When you're talking about sustainable practices, you're protecting the soil, you're preparing the soil for greater health later. You think about water retention, which is a big deal, especially on urban farms, but farms in general, how the water is handled, distributed, how it's moving through irrigation. And then think also biodiversity, right? Which is another big piece inside of the piece about actually attacking climate change. And so these are just some ideas of when you think about sustainable or regenerative farming, this is what should come to mind, right? But how does it play into climate change that we're talking about right now? I'm sorry, well, let's go down. Okay, so when we talk about radon, I want you to think soil health, right? Because in these smaller spaces, we have about an acre of a space, which essentially we're working to do things that protect the soil, in turn creating what I would like to call a carbon vacuum, right? We know that carbon sequestration is a big piece of climate change and being able to trap that carbon. And so a space like we have now, curating what we have on the space, allow us to do that, right? Again, also carbon sequestration with sea level rises and being clear about not wanting the earth to thaw as fast as it is, right? And we know once the ice melts, sea level rise, and then the problems continue. Wildfire, my other side of the screen is a little bit cut off, but wildfires, I talked a little bit about water retention, right? These are some models that if you think about sustainable practices in different areas of the world where we're having these problems, water retention, how we use it, how we move it through our spaces, our systems, that will be a natural firefighter, right? It's like folks tell you, you stay away from dry grass. You don't want to set a fire near dry grass, right? And you're thinking about if we have things like that that actually contribute to our economies that we're in, then it actually helps us in the natural way of being able to defend ourselves against what's being offered. I also talked about grazing and reducing chemicals, which is a big part, right? Because of course, if there are a bunch of chemicals being used on any land and anything with fire happens, then you can expect science to do its job there. And then lastly, I'll say asthma triggers, which is a really, really big one, right? We all know somebody with asthma. Enhancing biodiversity is a big piece of the asthma triggers. I want to introduce something that's called the farm effect, which essentially, if you spend your time or if you've been able to spend some time on a farm with livestock, different biodiversity, you have been able to have experienced what is like good bacteria, right? What is bacteria that when inhaled, when ingested, this is all stuff that's good for you, like good I'm saying it right, microbial like bacteria, and it's very like beneficial. This in turns allow you to actually develop your immune system a long time, right? However, we all don't get that opportunity, obviously, to be on farms. And so what we're hoping to create is a space that offers the livestock, right? That offers the different biodiversity, that offers less chemicals and less airborne pollutants, that allows folks to actually have a breath of fresh air in that way, right? Where we're talking about actually reducing the container that is crushing them to be able to actually want to be able to breathe how they need to breathe, right? And we talked a little bit about it before, but the idea that there are so many asthma triggers, right? Then we are kind of just subject to them right now. Again, it's not really something we can just like stop, right? We have to do something to push back against it, right? Because or else it doesn't get better. And so lastly, what I'll share is just how are we as in Black Yield Institute doing the work and showing up inside of what we actually are lifting up today, right? So we're creating one of the models that I'm actually describing. I showed a little bit of what we've shown. Our concept design will actually be finished at the bottom of this year, so we're excited about that. However, the things that's happening on our urban farm, agroecological urban farm, we have chickens, quails, goats, bees that we're going to be adding, solar panels, irrigation systems, water management. I think we're working with the French drain that really allows us to manage the water, keep the puddles out, raised beds, grazing, enhancing, like I said, protecting that soil, biodiversity. We use mulch covers, which breaks down in soil, also good nutrients. We are implementing green roofs, right? Which is a big piece of the biodiversity piece. Political education, reduce chemicals, teaching folks about soil improvement and security and safety measures, but all things that will contribute to the sustainable practices overall. And we are working again, we're 0.7 acres, so right under, a little bit under an acre. But with 0.7 acres, you can conquer about 7,000 pounds of carbon every year, right? And so when you put that in perspective, if we're talking about models that we are able to recreate and replicate in other spaces, other places, let's scale it to about 200 of these things across the planet somewhere. We're talking about 1.4 million pounds of carbon, right? Out of just something a little less than an acre, right? And so I'm just putting in perspective that we're talking about a model today, but we're talking about something again that pushbacks. And I put this little quote in here just to make sure I didn't forget it. But our models don't just mitigate climate change; they also act as agents in combating it, right? And so once we begin to replicate these, then we have a greater impact at a larger scale, and right. And so essentially, creating these spaces today, what it looks like for us is this how we're attacking climate change, and then I'm sure in Jacqui's space and further beyond, we'll learn more about as we scale, how much bigger of an impact it can have, right? And so, yeah, that's all I had. Didn't want to take too much time.
So, hi, my name is Jacqui Hossfeld, and I'm a health coach. You may be wondering, why is a health coach talking about what is a health coach going to talk about as far as soil? But what I wanted to talk about was the intersection of soil health, climate health, and human health. And they all come together in a setup kind of like what Lee was describing. So as a health coach, this is the dietary nutrition plan that I teach and that I follow. So if you notice the circles up here, animal proteins and added fats, we're going to avoid a lot of the sugar stuff, the processed foods, and we're going to stick to the animal proteins, the animal fats, and we'll talk about why. So what we're finding out is that a lot of the problems with chronic disease are caused by poor nutrition, which is a lack of protein, lack of fats, and too much processed foods. And that includes asthma. Here's a couple studies, and one dating all the way back to 1930, that shows that asthmatic symptoms are decreased by a ketogenic diet, which is a low-carb diet, and higher protein. And here's some mechanisms. So if you wanted to take a time, pause here, take a look through. But basically, when you have low blood sugar, your blood flows more freely through these little tiny blood vessels that go through your lungs called the alveoli. And when these get all clogged up, you have a higher prevalence of asthma and asthmatic symptoms. Other things that happen is when you do a low carb diet, you develop ketones, and ketones are very well known for decreasing inflammation. Another aspect, which really ties into what Leah was saying, the fresh meats have lower histamines than things you would buy from a supermarket. So this is also going to decrease symptoms because histamines are a trigger. A big thing specifically about meats is that they are more they have more protein that's bioavailable and complete in amino acids. So some of the most important ones are tryptophan and lysine, and also the complete amino acids, complete proteins are essential for the diaphragm, which makes your lungs expand and contract. Now, one of the other major components of asthma is that if you have a higher class of obesity, your asthma symptoms get worse. This kind of nutrition does promote weight loss, which will decrease the prevalence of refractory asthma or asthma that's resistant to medications. So, if you want to know why is this combination of animal, soil, and climate so important? If you look at this timeline, 2.5 million years ago, we were hunting and eating meat. We evolved with it. Our environment evolved with the meat. Our soil evolved with the meat and with us. Agriculture itself was only 10,000 years ago. Modern foods was only 300 years ago. And this is what I want to highlight also is deliberate fasting was first documented about 2,500 years ago, and that it really helped with refractory or childhood epilepsy. So before it was deliberate, it was accidental. It got away. We don't have enough food. So when we combine eating the meat and then taking a break, that's when we really get the healing. The healing comes from the rest. This comes from rebuilding the meat that we get from farms like Lee's. Now, what we're fighting right now is the modern food system: vegetable oils, refined grains, fruits bred for sweetness, packaged foods, artificial sweeteners, colors, and emulsifiers. These are really degenerating our health, and especially with asthma, because these artificial ingredients can be triggers. And also, we talked a little bit about the refined grains and sugars that are problematic for the blood vessels. So you can't separate the food production from the human physiology. And we are trying, but that's leading to the degradation of our soil, water, air, and our health. So what I would like to see is a collaboration between integrative farmers like Lee and Black Yield Initiative and health coaches who are interested in human health. So thank you for listening to my part.
No, that was great. Thank you. All right. So, wow, I've got lots of questions here. Our theme for Maryland Climate Tech 2026 is, housing as healthcare, the case for climate resilient, healthy homes, and the impacts of radon, asthma triggers, wildfire smoke, and sea level rise. But I wanted to include this conversation because I think both of your presentations do involve other methods of health and wellness. So I just got a couple of questions. Y'all have a few minutes?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So Jackie, it says that I should be avoiding bananas, and I guess that includes plantain as well. I, I, gosh, are they
So
are they reforming the bananas to make them sweeter or something like what?
yes,
Okay.
that's one of the oldest fruits
Hmm.
that's been genetically bred to be sweeter. Now, having said that, if it's seasonal, like if it's grown in a tropical climate, we live in Maryland. Sometimes we get really hot summers.
Hmm.
In the summer, it's okay. You just need a break from it from a while. We talked about the fasting part.
Hmm.
So as long as you're taking a break from it, you're taking break from fruit for a while, it's fine. It's just not an everyday thing.
Interesting. Okay, interesting. Very interesting. And then, I've always seen and read and heard of asthma being kind of an indoor air quality issue. But there apparently are some dietary, pathways that people can take to help kind of balance things out a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So yeah, the biggest component is that it is tied to that the severity is tied to obesity. What happens is your lungs can't expand.
Mhm.
The blood vessels get glommed up with sugar. It turns into like a glue, like wet cotton candy. So that causes a lot of problems. There are like a lack of protein will cause the cartilage in the airway to break down and not build up. A lot of different issues, hormone issues, insulin resistance. The small cells can't get the nutrition it needs. So a comprehensive program would look something like putting the air monitors in that I know Concares is really good for.
Mhm.
Plants, getting good source animal products like the as fresh as you can get. Um, in a well-raised environment, like in Lee's chickens that they're cared for, they're not just factory farms. That's going to have a better inflammatory profile in someone's body. So that overall body inflammation does contribute severely to asthma. So you have the inflammation of the lungs itself, but then there's the background asthma, the background inflammation. So once you eat better, that gets better. It's easier to treat with over-the-counter meds or with treating the indoor air quality. So it has to go hand in hand. You, because just one isn't going to solve the whole thing. It has to be a complete package.
A kind of a holistic approach.
Exactly.
Interesting. So yeah, so that's actually how you and I met. You did the concierge 30-day healthy home checkup, and
Yeah.
we put one of these monitors in your home for 30 days, and we measured radon, asthma triggers, of course, which you had none. So so that was interesting. Okay, Lee, I've got a couple of questions for you. You started out your first slide with some worms. Some people might be like, "Ooh, it's a little creepy," but
I need the attention. Yeah, no.
no, it's all good. I have last year I started. My wife and I start. Well, I started really because she doesn't really she doesn't deal with the worms, kind of a vermicomposting type scenario. And so I went to what Uncle somebody's worms, Uncle Bob or something like that, worm farm, and got a bunch of worms and put them in a big bin. And, I followed all those instructions. And I haven't checked on them lately, but I'm hopeful that they made it through the winter. But, it was a very interesting, process. This will be our first kind of cycle, so I think we'll have some pretty decent soil as we start we have a small, green stalk thing that we do here at home because we don't have much space. We live in a townhome here in Randallstown, so we don't have a lot of space. We don't have like you know, a homestead of any sort. So, talk a little about Lee and Jackie, how this works for people that have, smaller spaces. If I want to do something on my deck, even when it comes to indoor air quality, we always talk about 8 plants per person. But you really touched on just the whole, urban farming, health and wellness, cleaning the air.
Yeah, no, for sure. One thing I'll say is that while I emphasize on the urban farming piece, there are several things that you can learn from the regenerative practice that you can take to your house and
Mhm,
actually like have some impact there as well, right?
mhm,
For folks who have townhomes, right, we often encourage you to still encourage indoor plants. Different kind of there are several plants that actually work as active like air quality
mhm,
like purifiers, if you will. My wife has a living room full of them. I don't know the names. I know some are snake plants and elephant ears, and there's a bunch of different names. However,
yep,
these plants naturally work to do their job, right? And so that's one thing I want to lift up is that when I talk about these different processes, they're sustainable. I'm not using or saying anything that hasn't been here
mhm,
forever at this point, right?
mhm,
And so it's essentially setting the container to allow what's already here to do its job, right? So I think plants is a big one. I also think that like being closer to green spaces, being closer to community gardens is a big one. I think how folks are handling the water, whether you have it may not, I know some folks in townhomes have smaller like spaces, maybe a yard or so. I
mhm,
also know there are community spaces that kind of like
mhm,
serve as like a lobbying area.
mhm,
But
mhm,
I think just the management of all of those things in your own green spaces
mhm.
are going to be key, right? And I think with those efforts and along with the outdoor being closer connected to urban farms, community farms that are practicing the right way, I think it'll all kind of do its job. And that's the economy, right? When you understand that everything in the economy, eco is home, it's all of the living thing, everything here has a job. And so you can't think the plants are not just doing nothing all day, right? You know what I mean? So they're working 24/7 too, So I just encourage folks to think about that.
Yeah, our thesis is that the change in climate change starts at home,
Yes,
right?
sir.
There are things that we can do in our individual lives to be able to help we're on the Western Shore, the folk our family members and friends and descendants of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, like they're suffering on the Eastern Shore
So,
from sea level rise caused by, greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. Lee, talk a little bit more about your farm, kind of where is it located? I think you said you're in Curtis, you have a footprint in Curtis Bay, and then I saw on the slide something around 409 South Calhoun.
yeah, yeah. So Black Institute hosts three marketplaces, and they're in different areas in South Baltimore. One of those areas, which also houses our agroecological farm, is the Mount Clair community. And if you're familiar with Mount Clair Junction, we're actually like right across the street from that shopping center. But at 409 South Calhoun Street, like I said, today we're kind of rounding out the farm side and soon to move to the market side. Because we are heavy in the food systems, heavy in sovereignty and how we're using land to develop and give power back to communities. Largely, we are creating a marketplace that will be the flagship of our overall market, but also will work as a community place where you have vendors, workshops, folks are doing political education. There's community research. Things are happening constantly. In addition, it's also connected to our actual farm, where you'll
Mhm.
be able to experience how we process or how we're doing our quail eggs. You'll be able to see the live chickens, understand what the green roofs and the bee boxes are doing. Like I said, everything's doing their job. We've done our best to actually incorporate a little bit more, trying to get a better carbon footprint, if you will.
Mhm.
And something cool to know about urban farms is that we often kind of offset a carbon footprint. So whatever we put out, we often what they would call is our carbon negative by the end of
Mhm.
that year.
Mhm.
So we again pushing back a little bit,
Mhm.
but we also have digitally controlled humidity containers. That's what we'll be growing our mushrooms for production. We're producing as many herbs as we can to produce tinctures, promoting a little bit more biodiversity and the stuff that we're planting around, and also just trying to, um, what I would say is kind of mold ourselves along what's already there, right? So you'll see us kind of work with with all is in the whole space
Mhm.
around us.
Mhm.
So yeah, really excited about that. Looking forward to being open next year. We'll be hosting volunteers. We'll be hosting a lot of our workshops, a lot of our engagement events, and it's going to be fun, man. We got office spaces there. Yeah, just it's some really cool stuff. We got to dream a lot, and I think once it gets finished, it'll be like the standard of a model. I'll say.
So, so as you were talking, and you had that slide up, I did Google 409 South Calhoun, and so it looks like the end of the block, but it's in a residential community. Any zoning issues that you had to overcome, or the are your neighbors all excited about what's coming?
The neighbors are super excited. One thing that you'll know about our organization, we work alongside the folks that we serve. So there's never going to be a time like I would never come into either of your houses and just start moving couches around, right? And so a big part for us is having those community engagement conversations, developing what folks want to see, what will be beneficial to them, how can they be a part of what's happening in the community. And then that's what we work off of. So we haven't had any issues. Folks have largely bought in. When we didn't have gates and security, they have been part of the gates and security for us. So
Mhm.
these are the folks that we're engaging when we have our events that are leading up to as we gradually start to kind of move towards having things completed. Folks are invited. When we're working on it, the gates are open. It's not like, this is alongside community. It's not something that we
Mhm.
plan to like hold as our own.
Mhm.
Everything that we're working to build them so communities can have them for themselves as part of like power vehicles in their community, right? So
Speaking of that, are there any plans for a like to set this up as kind of a resiliency hub or maybe community solar or anything like that, since you are kind of in a residential community?
not I wouldn't say so, not yet. I think there's some
Okay.
stuff in the works.
Mhm.
I think right now largely it's about just getting the production back to where it was for
Mhm.
since kind of starting to develop the space.
Mhm.
And also just getting our like what I would say, just our feet stuck in the soil for the marketplace, right? That's a big
Mhm.
piece for us. We currently own the land on South Calhoun Street. However, the other marketplaces that we operate, we're renting there.
Mhm.
And so we want to have a place to be able to start like
Mhm.
flagship and to have folks
Mhm.
know this is
Mhm.
us,
Mhm.
this is where you'll be seeing us at, this
Mhm.
is what it
Mhm.
looks like,
Mhm.
and then we can build from there, right? So
Understood.
excited.
Understood. Understood. Thank you for that. So Jackie, you're a health coach. What's the normal pathway to for people to engage? And do you go to them? Do you have a facility where people come to you, or kind of or do you do a little bit of both? How does that
A
work?
little bit of both. So we can either meet online or we can go to a library space. I wanted to keep it affordable, so I don't rent an office space or anything like that. So, library spaces, their house. I have a little office up here in my house if people are comfortable with that. My website is available on my slides.
Hmm.
But yeah, we talk
It'll
a lot about
magically
diet.
appear on the screen and post, so don't worry about
Oh,
that.
awesome. So I did want to touch on something that Lee said
Sure.
was green space. Offering green space to people in South Baltimore is actually amazing for psychological health. I am very tied into metabolic psychiatry. So we use food, exercise, green spaces to help people with their psychological needs. Again, it's all tied in together. That's what we evolved with. We evolved with trees. We evolved with animals. If we don't get in touch with that, then we're going to have issues. You don't get in touch with fresh air, you're going to have lung inflammation, asthma, and COPD. So yeah, all this stuff is leading us back to where we should have been. We've had this divergence from the natural for so long, and we're hurting.
Mhm.
And I want to get back to more natural ways of living.
Absolutely. So a lot of what you talked about, you mentioned obesity and things like that, and kind of what that can do to exacerbate asthma. But what about the youth? Who are, their lungs, they breathe much faster, many more times than we do. They're closer to the ground where a lot of these, particulates and things like that, permeate. They put everything in their mouth.
Yeah.
How do you like treat the whole family as opposed to maybe just the adults?
So it has been proven a lot that a low carb ketogenic diet is good for kids, especially when you're talking about epilepsy.
Mm,
It was the first proven thing to be assisted with. Um, so the whole family should be supportive in this case for the kids if they are having blood sugar issues or seizures or asthma. It would be real I did ideal if the whole family was involved so that the kids don't feel alone. I mean, we're grown up from birth to be addicted to sugar.
mm,
Um, it, what the sugar industry's done over the past 200 years, I'm sure you guys can imagine. Um, but from birth, we're addicted. Little baby boys, when if they get circumcised, they're given a sugar pop.
mm,
Our first birthday, it's a big cake.
mm.
And occasionally it's okay, but the fact that, oh, you had a bad day, let's go to the store and get some
Some ice
candy.
cream, right?
We're taught to feed the emotions. We're not taught to sit and adjust to them and see what we can do about them. So I'll taking care of the family is very important to me, and that's one of the things that I really try to do with people, especially my own family, because I'm I'm my own learning experience.
Correct, right.
Yeah, I'm the one who tried to try to soothe with candy, and I've learned my lesson. My kids are grown now, but we've worked through it. So,
So
I have the lived experience for that.
what would you say is your biggest barrier to adoption? I mean, it sounds great, everything that you mentioned, but what would you say is what's standing in your way from kind of everybody doing it?
Not lack of knowledge. Um, because I know there's a lot of people that are like, oh, I want to lose weight, I want to cut calories.
Hmm.
I want to get better. I want to get, higher VO2 max. The problem is if you are looking for calories and you're not looking for the good quality building blocks that integrated farms like Lee's can provide you, you're just going to be looking at boxes, and looking at boxes is the absolute wrong way to go.
Hmm.
You look at farm raised veggies, you look at handcrafted uh, agriculture and animals and quail eggs, being able to see your own eggs on the farm is amazing. The other thing is, Lee, I don't know if you have any plans for children to come on, like school kids, like school
Yeah.
tours. Holy crap, that would be mind blowing.
Yeah, we've done that quite a bit in the past. We had a 1.25 acre space in the past that we were removed off of due to some housing authority stuff. So, but that's what prompted us to have the space we have. But before then, we've always been intergenerational, if you will. So you'll see youth, you'll see babies, you'll see elders. Like we have women generated spaces, men generated spaces. Just like it's something for everybody, right? The community is collectively brought into it. So yeah, the children will definitely be there and they will make their presence known. Trust me.
That is so
Note,
cool.
note to self, the way not to get kicked off a piece of land is to own it, right?
Yeah, there you go. That's the first thing we should know, right? Is it okay to add something really quick to
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
so Jack, you talked a little bit earlier about how just the soil improves like mental psychology as well. And I just wanted to touch on it and just say this piece, 'cause I think you brought that up and some of the other stuff earlier that you brought up just rolls right in. But a couple of years ago, I was learning or studying what was called a circular economy, which essentially talks about, again, like no waste, right?
Mhm.
And that's one of the ways that we move away from it. And so the idea of having a regenerative process, because we practice it on the farm, but we also practice it within our organization, right?
Awesome.
And we even have something that's called regenerative accountability. And essentially, what that means is to be accountable to a goal, right? And whatever is good for you, right? If our goal is to be fit, like then when we say, hey, we're going to the gym every day, then we want to motivate us towards that goal. But if we say, hey, we didn't make the gym, let's give ourselves a sugar pop to make ourselves feel better, we want to say, hey, we probably shouldn't be giving ourselves a sugar pop. And so I'm just lifting that up, that in nature or as nature, because I also want to make clear that we are also a part of it. I get struck when people say, I'm gonna go out in nature, and I'd be like, you're part of this too, right? You're
Yes.
part of this whole cycle. And so just
So
making clear,
right.
like that's a big part of economy, right? And understanding where us as human beings fit inside of that, right? Because like there's space for us. There's a reason that there's health from just being connected, being a part of it, being attached and engaged. There's reasons why like the food that are produced on sustainable farms and the methods that are used are producing a different kind of nutrient than these machine and factory ran farms. So just lifting it up that again, if we understand the earth as a living thing, we understand all of its components and everything that's here. We have a lot to do our job. Now, us as human beings have to do better job at making decisions, and I think that's what Jacqui was bringing it to, is that like education is key, right? We do political education at all of the things that we work with, because what's the point of telling you something new and not teaching you why we're telling you that, right? And so I just thought that was really big, Jack, and I just wanted to follow up. Just wanted to make that, flag that. Yeah.
Appreciate that. That really, really good points.
Absolutely. So Lee, I guess same question to you. What would you say is your biggest barrier to adoption, and expansion? Are you a for-profit or nonprofit or
Nonprofit.
nonprofit? Okay. So the question, I guess the first question is, what's your biggest barrier to adoption? And then, how can people engage and support your nonprofit work, your social impact work?
I'll start with supporting for us, just one, being connected is a big deal for us. We're big on relationships, big on who we're connected to. So please, our handles, tap in with us at Black Yield on Instagram, blackyield.org is our website. We have a bunch of events that you can engage with us on outside of the farm, but the farm is one of our biggest spaces. And for adoption, now remind me again, I just want to be clear. When you say adoption, you mean adopting the practices of the climate change, if you will?
Yeah, just embracing some of the methodologies, that you have in regards to urban farming. I would assume that everybody's like, all for it. But you've run up against some objection in the
Yeah,
past.
absolutely.
You got displaced. So
Yeah.
so you overcome some of the barriers, I guess. What are some of the newer barriers that you're facing, if any?
Yeah, for sure. No,
Or is
that
it all roses and rainbows?
oh, I can't find the rose. You know what I mean? I'm still looking for the beautiful roses, but
I'll bring you some.
I think the barriers come up. I think there's education is a big part of it, right? There's the lack of know, right? The know what's better, what we should be practicing,
Mhm.
and how it contributes to a better tomorrow for us all, like as a unit. I think there's also, and I have this struggle, man, that capitalism has afforded us convenience, man,
Mhm.
and it has pounded us into the ground to not even think that we're supposed to like be going home and cooking every night or making meals
Mm.
for ourselves. Like today,
Mm.
the better option is to grab you a McDonald's,
Mm.
meal on the way. And they've done it so well that they've even made Happy Meals and King Burger King. Everything is like
Right.
marketed with emotion again, right? Again, we're
Right.
playing to emotions where
Mhm.
there's a toy in the box. So you have a reason to stop by
Mhm.
here,
Mhm.
make your child happy, we solve your problem. But I think convenience comes up in
And
a
then the
lot of
pet cups. Your pet, you got a
the
reason to
pet
stop for your
cups,
pet
right?
too.
And so I think
Oh
that's a
God,
big piece
pet
of it, right?
cups.
Folks are focused on just the capitalism piece of it. You think about what grocery stores need to survive. That is where how high fructose corn syrup comes from. When
Mhm.
Jackie's talking about sugars, high
Mhm.
fructose corn syrup is a preservative. However, it's also responsible for a lot of the obesity issues that you'll see. It's in everything, right? And so you go to another country. I've been to quite a few countries at this point, and none of them are using high fructose corn syrup, right? And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
just putting in perspective that when you talk about adoption, I think one of it is the education. I think the other half is that like folks don't even got a chance to participate sometimes. I think like realistically, man, life is not easy, especially in the communities that we come from. In Cherry Hill alone, in
Mhm.
2021, I want to say the median household was around 25 or
Yeah.
28,000. And
Yeah.
so, if you got 3 or 4 children at home and you're trying to make that work, it's hard to think about
And
what is
that's the median. That's the
right,
median. Yeah.
and so it really does hard. It really is hard.
Mhm.
And it puts pressure on the community, but that is what we hope to serve in the space, right?
Mhm.
Making these hubs don't change tomorrow, but we can change the tomorrows down the line, just, one day at a time. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, that's a big piece for us. But I would say education, and I would just say like folks just being kind of like stuck in the day-to-day life, life doing what life does, if you will.
Mhm. Mhm. So what we'll do is, we'll put a QR code up on the screen that goes directly. You have a donate page, I guess, on your website
Yes, sir.
where people can make a donation. So we'll make it easier for people to support you in that way. Jacqui, are you a for-profit or nonprofit or quasi or
I am a for-profit, but most
okay.
of my work is educational.
Okay.
So I do a lot of classes, a lot of online things. I have a Facebook support group, and I hope to get a weekly or bi-weekly support group. I run various health events, and I teach dance classes also. It basically covers my expenses, but my
Mhm.
passion really is education and helping people figure out how to incorporate these healthy ideals into their own lives.
Right, right. So we'll have a QR code so people can get connected with you as well. Is there anything that I didn't ask you? I mean, like I said, this is a new space for me. When I got your individual presentation titles and abstracts, I was like, I don't know how this is gonna fit together. But I think by putting you two together in more of a conversational type atmosphere, it makes perfect sense now. Whereas before, it was me. It wasn't you. It was me just kind of coming along to some of the things that you're working on. But I think this is a nice addition to the conversation. But is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want people to know about either of your organizations?
No, no. Folks know where to find us, know what we do, talk a little bit about our work, and just come check us out, learn a little bit more about us.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. One thing I did want to add on is that some of the things I do teach is eating better on a budget.
Mhm.
So we talk about different cuts of meat, meal prep ahead of time, and a lot of things and integrating fasting if you can, because of course you eat less, it's going to cost you less.
Right.
So and also lack of snacking does save a lot of people money. So I talk about that in detail and help people get over if they're addicted to anything.
Awesome. Hey, Jackie Lee, this has been great. I appreciate your thought leadership, your subject matter expertise, and taking some time to educate me on some things that I wasn't aware of. So I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All
All
right,
right.
thank you so much for having us.
My pleasure. Y'all have a great day.
You too.
You too.
Bye bye.